Venezuela is a nation defined by paradox. It is a land blessed with extraordinary natural riches. This South American country sits atop the world's largest proven oil reserves. That is more than Saudi Arabia, more than Canada, more than any other nation on Earth. This immense underground ocean of crude oil should, by all logic, make it one of the wealthiest places in the world. Beyond the black gold, Venezuela's natural endowment is stunningly diverse. Gold, bauxite, diamonds, fertile lands capable of vast agricultural output, rivers with immense hydroelectric potential, Caribbean coastline of breathtaking beauty, Andes Mountains in the west, Amazonian jungles in the south. This wealth, however, tells only one part of a complex and tragic story. For millions of Venezuelans, this abundance is distant and abstract. Their daily reality is struggle, not wealth. The promise of oil has soured, a blessing turned curse. Understanding this sharp contrast is key to the crisis. The journey from regional powerhouse to nation in crisis is a cautionary tale. How did a country with everything find itself desperate? There was a time, not so long ago, when Venezuela was the embodiment of hope in South America. During the mid-20th century, the discovery and exploitation of oil transformed the nation. Petrodollars flooded the national treasury, fueling an era of unprecedented growth and modernization. The country became known as Saudi Venezuela. It was a magnet for immigrants from Europe and neighboring Latin American countries. The capital, Caracas, sprouted gleaming skyscrapers, modern highways, and sophisticated cultural centers. The government used oil revenues to fund expansive social programs. Public education and healthcare were made widely available, and were of a high standard for the region. Subsidies kept the price of gasoline and basic goods incredibly low. People enjoyed a high standard of living with access to consumer goods and opportunities that were the envy of many. The national oil company Petróleos de Venezuela, S.A. or PDVSA, was created in 1976. It became a source of national pride and a world-class energy player. The belief took hold that the oil would flow forever. This assumption would later prove to be a fatal flaw. Even during the boom years, the seeds of future problems were being sown. The economy became overwhelmingly dependent on a single commodity. While the money flowed, there was little incentive to develop other sectors. The national mindset shifted to consumption rather than production. The government became the primary distributor of wealth, rather than a facilitator of a diverse and resilient economy. This reliance created a structural vulnerability. The entire nation's fortune was tied to the fluctuating price of a single product on the international market, a risk that was dangerously underestimated during the good times. Fertile farmland was abandoned. Factories that once produced textiles, shoes, car parts closed their doors. The nation transformed from a producer of diverse goods into a consumer of foreign ones, all paid for with oil money. This created a critical vulnerability, a ticking time bomb at the heart of the economy. The over-reliance on oil permeated every aspect of the nation's economic life. The government budget became almost entirely dependent on oil revenues, creating a cycle of boom and bust. The political culture became one of distributing oil wealth rather than creating it. The turn of the century marked a dramatic shift in Venezuela's political and economic landscape. The rise of Hugo Chavez to the presidency in 1999 initiated what he called the Bolivarian Revolution. Initially, high oil prices in the 2000s provided the funds for this vision. The government expanded social missions providing food, housing, and medical care to the poor. However, this era also saw the beginning of profound economic mismanagement that would have catastrophic long-term consequences. A key element was the systematic dismantling of institutional checks and balances. The government began to exert increasing control over all aspects of the economy. This included widespread nationalizations of private companies in sectors ranging from agriculture, banking, cement, steel. The state also took greater control of the once independent central bank. Price and currency controls were implemented, supposedly to combat inflation and protect consumers. In reality, these policies distorted the market, created massive inefficiencies, and discouraged private investment. Alongside mismanagement, corruption began to fester and grow into a systemic problem. With trillions of dollars in oil revenue flowing through state-controlled channels with little transparency, the opportunities for graft were immense. Reports emerged of vast sums being siphoned off through fraudulent contracts, currency exchange schemes, outright embezzlement. The state oil company, PDVSA, once a model of efficiency, was hollowed out. It was filled with political loyalists rather than experienced professionals. Its production capacity started a long and steady decline due to lack of investment, lack of maintenance, lack of expertise. The very engine of the nation's economy was being systematically dismantled from within. These policies created a deeply unstable and unpredictable economic environment. The rule of law was weakened, and property rights were no longer secure. This deterred both foreign and domestic investment, which is essential for any economy to grow and diversify. The government's actions, intended to create a more equitable socialist state, were instead dismantling the foundations of a functioning economy and paving the way for total collapse. Venezuela is a textbook case of a phenomenon known as the Dutch disease. This economic term describes a situation where the discovery of a valuable natural resource paradoxically harms a country's broader economy. The massive inflow of revenue from the resource causes the nation's currency to strengthen, making other exports more expensive and less competitive. Agricultural goods and manufactured products became uncompetitive. At the same time, it makes imports cheaper. This double-edged sword systematically hollows out the country's other productive sectors, leaving the economy dangerously reliant on the single resource. For decades, Venezuela's non-oil industries withered on the vine. Before the oil boom, the country had a robust agricultural sector, exporting coffee, cocoa, and other products. But as the petrodollars rolled in, it became cheaper to import food and finished goods. Factories that once produced textiles, shoes, car parts closed their doors. The nation transformed from a producer of diverse goods into a consumer of foreign ones, all paid for with oil money. This created a critical vulnerability, a ticking time bomb at the heart of the economy. The over-reliance on oil permeated every aspect of the nation's economic life. The government budget became almost entirely dependent on oil revenues. When oil prices were high, the government could spend lavishly, but this created a cycle of boom and bust. Venezuela's economy became a monoculture. It was a giant with a single fragile leg to stand on. Any shock to that one source of support would send the entire structure crashing down, leaving the nation completely exposed to the whims of the international energy market. The fragile foundation of Venezuela's oil-dependent economy finally cracked in 2014. A dramatic plunge in global oil prices sent shockwaves through the nation. The price of a barrel of crude fell from over $100 to below $50 and eventually even lower. For a government that relied on oil for approximately 95% of its export earnings, this was a cataclysmic event. The river of petrodollars that had funded everything from food imports to social programs suddenly slowed to a trickle. The years of mismanagement and lack of savings meant there was no buffer to absorb the shock. The impact of the price collapse was immediate and devastating. The government could no longer afford to import the vast quantities of food, medicine, and other basic goods. Pharmacies ran out of essential medicines, from simple painkillers to life-saving cancer treatments. The government's response was not to liberalize the economy, but to print money aggressively to cover its massive budget deficit. This poured gasoline on the fire of inflation, which soon spiraled into hyperinflation, rendering the bolivar virtually worthless. Compounding the domestic crisis were growing international pressures and targeted sanctions. The United States, the European Union, and other countries imposed targeted sanctions. These measures complicated the country's ability to engage in international finance and sell its oil, further strangling its primary source of income. The combination of low oil prices and international sanctions created a perfect storm. The Venezuelan economy was caught in a powerful vice, squeezed from within by its own policy failures and from without by global market forces and geopolitical conflict. The consequences of this economic collapse are not abstract statistics. They are etched onto the daily lives of the Venezuelan people. Hyperinflation has made savings and salaries meaningless. A month's wages can be wiped out in a matter of days, sometimes even hours. Citizens carry bulky stacks of near-worthless banknotes just to buy bread. Grocery shopping has become an ordeal, with long queues for scarce, rationed goods. Many families skip meals. Malnutrition affects children and the elderly. It's a widespread public health crisis. Public services have collapsed. The healthcare system, once a regional model, is now in ruins. Hospitals lack antibiotics, surgical gloves, and even running water. Chronic power outages and water shortages are daily realities, disrupting work and school and the ability to cook or store food. Roads, bridges, and the electrical grid are crumbling from neglect. life has regressed for many by decades. This crisis has triggered a massive migration. Faced with hunger, lack of opportunity, and breakdown of social order, millions have chosen to leave. They flee to Colombia, Peru, Brazil, and beyond, often with only the clothes on their backs. Families are separated. A generation of refugees is born. It's a tragic brain drain. Doctors, engineers, teachers, and other skilled professionals are leaving. The social fabric is torn. Crime has soared. Political polarization divides neighbors and families. Yet resilience remains. People share resources, build community networks. The Venezuelan spirit is tested but not extinguished. Their endurance is a testament to human strength, waiting for the right conditions to finally transform Venezuela's great wealth into genuine well-being for all its people.